Turn to Romans 6. Tried this last week. It didn't work last week. Maybe it'll work this week. We'll see. Romans 6. Last week I preached on how much more. And I like how much more. How much more can God do? How much greater is the glory? How much better is the glory now? How much more is He wanting to do now than we want for us? That was last week. This week I thought I'd preach on just the opposite. What do you think the opposite of how much more is?
How much less we can do? No.
No more.
Oh, no more.
That makes sense?
Let's hear you, what you have to say.
I'm moving, so let's see if I rearrange
Yeah, you're right.
the camera. Alright. Let's hear what we have to say first. That's my wife. Romans 6, start in verse 9. I'm looking at verse 6 thinking, that's not it, it's verse 9. Well, I'm going to start in verse 8. For if we be dead with Christ, we believe that we shall also live with Him, knowing that Christ, being raised from the dead, dieth no more. Death hath no more dominion over Him. Let's stop there. Christ is raised from the dead. Jesus was raised from the dead. And what does it say? He dies no more. Death has no more dominion over Him. How should we live where we die no more? Before you're saved, what did you live? A life of death. Didn't you? Death works in our members. Physically, we're dying. Sorry, Sam, you're dying. From the point you were born, you started dying. The body gives way, and eventually those big, strong muscles are going to shrink up and sag, and those rock hard abs of yours are going to be, what's a good word? Jello soft? Possibly. Huh? Already there. See? Death works in your members. Things go downhill, but spiritually, in your walk with God, what happens? You die no more. But too many Christians are still dying. Spiritually, we're still dying. Why? Because we're continuing in the death that we lived before. You don't have to. What does it say? Knowing that Christ, being raised from the dead, dies no more. Death has no more dominion over Him. Death has no dominion over Jesus. Death has no dominion over you. No more dominion. It's time we start living in no more. But what has to happen? I now have to enter into His death. I have to get into the death of Jesus with Him. My life has to become one with His life. But we as Christians want to live His life in our life. We want to hang on to this and hang on to that and do this and do that. I guess I can say I sent an email out this morning to someone, and it was a drinking email. You know, just some scriptures about drinking and why not to, and why it's wrong and where it's wrong, and you know, people can do it, but I've never seen it work. You know, that they're going to drink a little bit. Never seen it work. And in all my years, all my experience, I've seen a lot of people try it. And it didn't work for them. It always ended badly. See, they want to live in their life, in His life, God's life in their own life. But we have to come to where death has no more dominion. That life of death has no more dominion on us, in our lives. In other words, it's no more a part of our lives. How many want to separate from that life? Really want to separate from the old life? Wouldn't it be great to put all the old life and everything that was associated with it behind you? Because you guys, I know her life before she got saved. I know everything she ever did. You know, and she knows everything I ever did. Mine wasn't near as bad. Not near as bad as hers. But you know what? I had my own problems. I was a good sinner. You know, I wasn't a good old boy because that was my dad. He's a good old boy. I'm a city boy, so I couldn't, you know, there's no good old boys in the city. But I was a nice sinner. I didn't do all the bad stuff and the stuff we make really big. I didn't do any of that. You guys didn't do any of that. I mean, you don't know what it is to run around and carouse and drink and drugs and all that stuff. But you had your own stuff. Wouldn't it be nice to just completely separate from the old life? From the fear and the torment and the unbelief and the what are some of those other things? The insecurity, depression, the misery, the fear, all of that stuff. Separate from that to where we live in that life no more. Knowing that Christ being raised from the dead dies no more. That death has no more dominion over him. We can live that. You can live where death, the death of that life, the old man, the old life has no more dominion over you. I want to live that way. I was depressed long enough. Thank you. Don't want to go back. Do you know depression no longer has dominion over me? The insecurity that I had then no longer has dominion over me. Is that true? Mm-hmm. I'll ask my wife. She'll tell you the truth. She'll tell me the truth. If I ask her something and it's no, she'll tell me no. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's a slap in the face, but you know, the cold water in the face. But we want to live both lives. At some point, you have to decide, look at your life and say, I'm going to live the old life or I'm going to live the new life. But there has to be a place of death in between. Jesus had to die, then raised from the dead. Now death has no more dominion. When you die to the flesh and you raise in the newness of life, death has no more dominion over you. The death of that life, the hold of that life, the grip and the grasp and the claws and the bite and the experiences and all the stuff of that life can be put behind you. And that's where those stay. They're not part of your life anymore. They're now part of that life. I live in a new life. Everything about me is a new life. I always remember Virgil telling me the story about the guy that he got saved. He was a mobster. He was a hitman for the mob. And he was a high up in the mob, but he got saved. And the only thing that kept him alive, Congress called him up. And he had to go testify before Congress. And they say, did you do this? Do you know this? Did you do this? He said, that wasn't me. That was an old man. That was another man. It was not me. I have a new life. I'm a new creature in Christ Jesus. I have a new life. I live a new life. That was not me. That was not me. He just kept telling him the same thing. Didn't you do this? Weren't you part of this? Weren't you in this mob? Weren't you part of this crime family? That was not me. It was a new life. I have a new life. That was the old man, an old life. He said that was the only thing that kept him alive because the mob knew he would never tell. Because that was an old life. He lived in a new life. How many of us can look at our lives and say, that's how distinct a line there is between the old life and the new? I can look and say, right here, the old life stopped, the new life started. It's a new life. Now, that life behind me has no more dominion. Why? Because I'm not living there anymore. Now I'm living here. Everything in me says I'm going to live here. So let's go on. 9, 10. Death has no more dominion over him. For in that he died unto sin once. But in that he lives unto God. Likewise, reckon ye also yourselves to be dead indeed unto sin, but alive unto God, through Jesus Christ our Lord. For in that he died to sin once. Now he lives unto God. He said, likewise, you do the same thing. Reckon yourselves dead unto sin. What does it mean to reckon yourself? You know what it says? Mm-hmm. Reckon you also selves. Consider yourself dead. Live a life that you consider that life dead behind me. If something's dead, what do?
Bury it.
That's right. Okay, what don't you do? Go back and pick it up and mess with it.
Hang it around your neck and carry it around.
Yep.
Back.
I blew a snake's head off this week with my 12 gauge. It was running around the porch. I took that snake, what was left of it, with the hoe, picked him up with the hoe. Me and snakes don't get along. I'm not a snake fan. 4-foot long black snake. I am not a fan of snakes. I do not like snakes. I have never liked snakes. From a little boy, I've never liked snakes. But I had to take care of my wife, so I had to kill a snake that was circling the house.
And then you had to get the thing out.
Then I had to get the thing out of the house because it was right up next to the house. I picked the snake up with the hoe and took it to the field across the street and deposited it in the field. I said, every scavenger around can just feast away because I'm not touching the thing again. It's dead and gone. I'm not going to go back this afternoon, run across the street and pick that snake up and bring him back and hang him up on the porch. Why not? He's dead. Dead things stay dead. We don't need to try and give him life again. We don't need to try and bring him back to life. Maybe I can put his head back on, sew him back together. Maybe something can happen.
Don't be a taxidermist.
Yeah, I don't want to be a taxidermist. He took 2 12-gauge shots to the head and, it's been removed. So, he's dead. Likewise, you reckon yourselves dead. Consider that life dead. In other words, I'm not going to live in a way that I'm going to go back and pull from that life. Pull from that fear. Pull from all that stuff. I live in a way that now I am set free. That life has no more dominion over me. The trick between reckoning it and experiencing it is walking with God. Is using faith and walking with God. Because it's easy to consider something. I'm going to talk it to death and here's where it is. Here's where I live. But to get to where it's a reality in your life, sometimes it's difficult. That's where faith comes in. That's where I'm going to walk with God comes in. And that's where Jesus did everything necessary on the cross comes into play. I've got to get from reckoning it to this beast is still alive in my life. I'm not going to give it any say in my life anymore. Whatever it takes me, this is out of my life. I'm going to consider it dead. It has no more dominion over me. Now I'm going to do what? Do what Jesus did. Be alive unto God. Being alive means active, powerful, and strong. Is that how you want to live? How do you want to be alive? How do you want to live life?
Vigorously.
Lay in a deathbed?
No.
Couch potato?
Couch potato?
No.
Yeah. Well, even a couch potato can fall down and roll. Can roll to the fridge and back. Roll to the fridge, stand up, fill up on chocolate, and roll back. How do you want to live? Rosie, do you want to go back to that chair?
Vigorous life and health in His ways.
That's a good way.
That's my way.
Active, powerful, and strong. What kind of Christian do you want to be? This is what he's saying. All that he's saying here is death has no dominion in you. But now if you live unto God. You live active, powerful, and strong. He's trying to take all that was in you out and give you a life that's active, powerful, and strong. But there's a dividing line. Death is the dividing line. You have a life of death before, you have a life of life now. Jesus lived this way. Likewise, you reckon yourselves dead and live the same way. What Jesus had, you can have. How He lived, you can live. The way He went through life, you can go through life. I've never looked at Jesus, sweet baby Jesus, as depressed. I've never looked at Him as beat down, in fear, worried. I read and see Him under pressure, but He didn't